Welcome to the Simply Financial podcast. I'm your host, Christopher Calandra. So, my guest today is James Kennedy. He is the founder of Beach Cities Solar Consulting. And we were just talking, James and I, before I bring him on. And I'm excited to be doing this interview with him and have this discussion because I don't know much about solar energy. So, one of the charms about doing your own podcast is you could do stuff that you're interested in learning more about or what you're interested in talking about. So this is clearly expression of that from me. James has vast amounts of knowledge on solar and renewable energy. He's an entrepreneur. He also has experience with personal finance. If time allows, we'll touch on that a bit. But with property owners' energy bills going up each year, I live in Connecticut. I think Connecticut has the largest energy bills in the entire country. So it's a subject near and dear to my heart. He and his company provides a turnkey one-stop solution to get off the grid in under 1 year. So James, thanks for joining me today.
I appreciate you having me on, Chris.
So as I said in the introduction, I don't know much about the space and I'm a financial guy, right? You could even say a financial geek. Are you a solar geek?
I am.
So maybe we could start with just some questions about just some of the economic parts of things. How many people are using solar in the US today? Do you have any sense of how much penetration there is with solar?
Yeah, there's just over 2 million rooftops with solar installed on it in the country.
Okay. And how regionally is that dispersed? Because I mentioned I live in Connecticut, that's in the Northeast, and we have, winters. And it's a little bit different than in California, which I believe is your area of operation, right? So, but do you see more usage in the sun states like Arizona and California compared to the Northeast?
You do. That's a great question. And that's really where the adoption curve has started. Hawaii actually has the highest penetration in the country.
That makes sense.
Followed by California, and then of course other states that have high electricity costs. So Connecticut's one of them, New York's one of them, New Jersey is one of them. It's really the two coasts that are seeing the most penetration in the marketplace, again, because of that high cost of electricity. When you're looking at geographical areas like the Northeast, I actually grew up in New Hampshire, and every time I visit my folks, I'm in their ear a little bit about why they haven't put some solar panels on the house just yet.
Gotcha.
And I think it's hard for people that live in colder climates to wrap their head around the fact that the solar panels will still produce energy even in those climates.
Okay. So I want to circle back with that because it's one of the things I want to explore. But first, so if you own a property in California and you decide to go solar, does it increase the value of your property? And I'm talking generalities, right? Because, every house is different, markets are different, but, generally speaking, if I own a house in California and I go solar, does it affect the value of property?
It does. There's been a number of different studies on it. The New York Times has written about it. Forbes has written about it. In California, again, like you said, depending upon the area that you're living in, you're looking at an increase of about, again, this is solar geek talk, $5 or $6 per watt. So, that can be anywhere from $30,000 to $50,000 of added value to the home. As you get outside of those higher cost areas, obviously in California, you need $1 million just to get into the residential real estate market. If you're looking at an install in the Midwest or another area, that number could be lower. It could come down to maybe 20,000.
All right. So let's stick with the California theme for a moment, and then I'll ask about other locales. But so let's say the property goes up by 50,000, just to make up a number. Do you have a sense? Because it seems to me that some of that's going to be based on economics, right? You're saving energy, and so that computes to a higher value of the property because you're decreasing the cost of the home ownership, right?
Correct. Exactly.
But is some of that also the appeal, the non-economic appeal of being environmentally sensitive? Are people willing to pay more above and beyond the economics, like you mentioned, $5 or $6 a kilowatt hour, that's something you could spreadsheet. But are people willing to pay more, not just because of the economics, but because of the importance in their mind of being environmentally friendly?
Absolutely. So again, we work primarily along the California coast. So from San Diego all the way up to San Francisco. And that tends to be a very affluent and very green customer. So these customers were actually going solar before it made economic sense, which was only about, I'd say, 3.5 to 4 years ago. The cost of the equipment has come down so much that it's now obviously cheaper to own your own energy instead of renting it from the utility. These property owners were inclined to do the right thing for the environment when it was more expensive to install solar on your home or business. Now we're seeing the rest of the market, people that are more in the middle class and are just really looking to make a financially, economically savvy decision about saving money, also taking advantage of the technology.
So how long does it usually take to get a return on that investment, or what's the break even? And again, I recognize it's different regionally, but stick with California, and then I'll ask you some questions about the Northeast and some of the differences. But can you cite any statistics as far as what's the break even? If I spend X number of dollars, and I imagine we'll maybe get into some government tax incentives too as part of this answer. But what's the break even? If I spend money to convert to solar and I save on energy costs, when do I recoup my investment?
6 years. So in California, it's a 6-year return on investment. If you have a $300 a month Southern California Edison bill, you need a 10 kilowatt solar system to eliminate that bill. That's going to run you about $32,500 before that federal tax credit of 26%, which you just referenced.
Okay, yeah. So let's talk about the government tax incentives. So first off, the federal government has some incentives, right?
Correct.
And some states, do they have their own incentives too, or is it strictly the federal?
No, states are also incentivizing the adoption of the technology. In California, it's only a federal credit. So regardless of where you live in the country, if you install solar, you get a 26% federal tax credit the year that the project is installed.
Okay. So that means if you spend, just use a round number, you spend $10,000, you get a $2,600 credit on your tax return for that year.
Exactly. Correct.
Now, what if you finance it? Because a lot of times people are financing solar, right? They don't necessarily have the money to do it. So they either borrow on a home equity line of credit, or they go through some financing program through the solar installation firm, right? But let's say you finance it, can you still take the credit up front, or then is the credit amortized over the financing period?
Really good question. With rates as low as they are, we're seeing a lot of people, implementing a solar project with, like you said, a home equity line of credit or even a cash out refi. So there also are, third-party solar loans. There's a lot of competition in the marketplace. I just got an email this morning with new rates and terms from one of our providers. It's always up to the property owner. So as consultants and as an educational based firm, our job, much like your role in working with your clients, is to educate them and provide them options. So they can, no institution can force the property owner to pay them the tax credit, right? So a lot of these, if you're using a third party lender, they're typically split loans. So let's say the project is $30,000. 74% of that would be one loan and 26% would be one loan. So essentially the lender is going to give you that tax credit for free for a year. And if you decide to keep it, your entire loan will reamortize on the outstanding principal.
All right. So, and the 26% tax credit, that's been around a while?
Yeah, so that I'm glad you touched upon that, because Congress just extended it at the end of last year in the COVID relief bill. It was supposed to step down to 22%, and it was extended for 2 additional years.
Okay, so without an additional act of Congress signed into law, it would sunset in 2 years.
Correct.
Okay, interesting. And the break even, so let's switch to the Northeast, right, where I live. Do you have any sense? I know it's not your area of operation, although you're an expert in solar, but do you have any sense how much longer the break even is, or is it longer in the Northeast?
You're probably looking at a 7-year payback, 7 to 8 years.
It doesn't add that much more.
No, the good thing about the Northeast, and I'm not an expert on Connecticut, as you said, but I have worked on projects in New York, is that there are state incentives. Whereas in California, because so many people adopted the technology, those all got used up very early on, several years ago. So it may take a couple of years longer because you don't have as much sun. So you may need a slightly larger system to offset the amount of energy as if you were living in a Sunbelt state, but
Right.
some of that is offset by the additional incentives from the state.
From the state. And also, at least in the case of Connecticut, it's partially offset by the higher energy costs too, because I'm pretty sure Connecticut has the highest energy rates. So where do I want to go next in our conversation, James? So the technology of solar has improved quite a bit over the years, it seems to me. Is that right?
It certainly has.
So what we're trying to do, if we want more solar, because we believe that's, and I do believe that's environmentally friendlier, we need to drive the cost of solar installation down, the solar equipment, everything involved, and we have to drive it down, right? What do you think is the one biggest component in the short term that you think can be driven down in cost? Where do you think the action mostly lies in the short term?
Soft costs. So the soft costs are the marketing, the sales. It's typically about 20% of the project cost. We saw companies like Solar City 4 years ago, almost going out of business, having to be bought by Tesla because they had extremely high soft costs. They were essentially hiring an army of new college graduates to go from door to door knocking on your home. And there's a lot of costs to that, whether you're running internet ads or radio ads or television ads.
Okay. So it's like the cost of client acquisition is very high.
Correct.
So if you get more global acceptance, not global, but if you get more acceptance and customers convert to solar more easily and in bigger numbers, that'll drive down the cost.
Correct.
And what about the improvement of the actual technology? I would imagine increasing like lifespan or the improvement in how much sunlight can be converted to energy, like that formula, if that could be improved, I would imagine that would also drive costs lower, no?
Correct. So we've seen the cost of the hardware come down about 70% in the last 10 years. So Moore's law states that as any new technology is produced in mass, that the cost is going to come down. We've seen it with personal computers. We've seen it with cell phones. It's going to continue to happen with solar panels, but now we're seeing it happen with solar batteries, which is really exciting because with the two technologies combined together, even when the grid is down, you can still power your home or business.
Okay, very good. And is there a lot of, we're all dealing with so many technological changes. It's such a fast changing world across a wide variety of things affecting our lives day in and day out. I imagine there's a lot of technological innovation being researched and developed surrounding this important topic. Is there not? How do you keep track of all that?
That's one of the fun parts of my job.
Well, that's why you're a solar geek, right?
Exactly. If you're not passionate about it, much like you in finance, you've got to be passionate about what you do to stay on top of the trends and movements in the marketplace. Yeah, it's changing every day. Currently, we're seeing about 40% of our clients install batteries with their solar system. That was unheard of 3 years ago.
Oh, that's a great example.
Yeah.
Okay. And I'm going to ask a question. It may show how ignorant I am, so be gentle with me. If you own a home and you put solars on the roof, right? And then you need to replace your roof, is that a problem?
It is if you wait until after the equipment's on the roof.
Okay.
Yeah.
So in other words, so if I needed a roof in the next year or two, as an example, I shouldn't put solar on and then do the roof. I should do the roof and then do the solar.
Exactly. The rule of thumb is that if your roof has less than 5 years left on the warranty or general use, to do it at the same time as the solar install, because the solar equipment's warranted for 25 years. So it's gonna going to be up there for a long time. Many of our clients, I'm not a tax advisor, but many of our clients, whether they're homeowners, businesses, or even large corporations, are able to apply that federal tax credit to roof work as well. So that would be something.
Oh, so in other words, if it was done at the same time where there was a new roof install and a solar installation, that the tax credit could be used for the total cost of the project.
Correct. Exactly.
Oh, that's intriguing, James. I did not realize that. You figure the 26% tax credit, going back to that for a moment, it's likely to be extended, right? I mean, if you had to handicap it based on your expertise, what are the chances that when it sunsets in 2 years, does it go from 26 to 22 or does it go from 26 to 0? Do you know?
I don't know offhand, to be honest. It was scheduled to step down to 0, as you mentioned, in 2 years before the extension. What we do know is that the Biden administration is very pro-solar.
Sure.
They haven't rolled out their Green New Deal yet, but that figure that I mentioned at the beginning of our chat, 2 million, homes and businesses that have solar, the Biden administration's goal is to grow that to 8 million in their 4 years. So we're gonna, even if we come up short on that, we're going to have exponential growth.
Yeah, I believe that. And I would say, even my opinion would be, even if the new Green Deal doesn't get off the ground, let's just assume that it did not, I still think that there would be enough bipartisan support that in some legislation, like was done in the CARES Act last year in 2020, that you would still have a very good chance that gets extended, the tax credit.
Agreed.
That'd be my take on things.
Yeah, there's significant bipartisan support because of the job creation. Before COVID, Forbes magazine had stated in their December 2018 issue that solar installer was the fastest growing job in the country.
Really? Wow. I want to ask this, and I want to ask this in a sensitive way as we sort of begin to wind down. So the Northeast is, because I'm going to stray into politics a little bit, but the Northeast is fairly liberal part of the country, right? Like the state of Connecticut is a Democratic stronghold. The governor, the state House and Senate, the congressmen and women, the senators are all Democrat. And it's like that in much of the Northeast. And, Democrats traditionally are a little bit more in favor of alternative energy sources like solar. Is that fair?
Yes, very much.
And so California is also pretty liberal state, Democrat-led state, typically. Some states, like in the South, that are friendly in terms of the environment, are they less reluctant? I'm talking about, like Alabama, Mississippi as like examples. Not that I know much about those states. I've never been to them even. But are they a little more reluctant to adopt this technology because of being a little bit more conservative on the spectrum, that they're less likely to hop on the trend?
I believe so. Again, I think the majority of the adoption at this point is happening because it's in the property owner's financial best interest.
Yes.
So I would say it's a double-edged sword where, one, you may have a more conservative traditional viewpoint, and two, those states that you mentioned and some others, they already have a pretty low cost of electricity.
Okay, so that factors into it too.
That factors into
significantly.
Significantly. I know you guys have offices in Florida, and we're just chatting that you're going to be spending some time there. Florida has one of the lowest electricity prices in the country. And you would think Florida, my God, it's got so much sunshine, but the solar adoption rate is not very high, particularly because of the low cost of electricity.
Okay, that makes more sense, because I've seen numbers that the adoption in the Sun Belt is not as good. And I thought that it might be somewhat of a political, people voting with their pocketbooks. But it sounds like it's more of a cost of utilities is less, and the Northeast is being driven by the very high cost of utilities. That makes complete sense. So James, thanks for spending a few minutes. I learned a ton. This was awesome. So I learned several things about a subject I don't know much about, but it's definitely an emerging topic of importance in the markets too, as there's more and more investable plays involving clean energy, not just solar, but others as well. So I appreciate you giving me an education.
Thank you for having me on, and that's what we're here for. We're here to educate.
So for listeners that might want more information, where would you direct them to, James?
Our website, www.beachcitiessolarconsulting.com. I have a blog on there, an educational blog, and you can sign up for our newsletter to get a free copy of my ebook, Solar Energy Secrets for Homeowners. You can even enter your electric bill, picture of your electrical panel and roof, and get a proposal right on the site as well.
It's that easy. That's awesome. So thanks for sharing that. So listeners, that's the end of this episode. If you haven't subscribed to the podcast, Simply Financial Podcast, please do so. Recommend it to family, friend, coworkers. I'd love to have more listeners like all podcasters do. And I'll be back with you on the next episode of the Simply Financial Podcast very soon. Thanks for listening today.
The views expressed are not necessarily the opinion of SagePoint Financial Incorporated and should not be construed directly or indirectly as an offer to buy or sell any securities mentioned herein. Investing is subject to risks, including loss of principal invested. Past performance is not a guarantee of future results. No strategy can assure a profit nor protect against loss. Please note that individual situations can vary. Therefore, the information should be relied upon when coordinated with individual professional advice. Please note, the information being provided is strictly as a courtesy. When you link to any of the websites provided here, you are leaving this website. We make no representation as to the completeness or accuracy of the information provided at these websites, nor is the company liable for any direct or indirect technical or system issues or any consequences arising out of your access to your use of third-party technologies, websites, information, and programs made available through this website. When you access one of these websites, you are leaving our website and assume total responsibility and risk for your use of the websites you are linking to. Securities and advisory services are offered through SagePoint Financial Incorporated, member FINRA SIPC. Insurance services offered through Elliott Wealth Management, LLC, not affiliated with SagePoint Financial.